Hi, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. That noise you hear behind me is the sound of Midway Airport. Just about to get on a plane and fly to Philadelphia, where I'll be going to Netroots Nation. If you're at Netroots, be sure to stop me and say hi, and I'll give you some Two Broad swag. Today's episode features Erica Smith, who is running for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. Enjoy. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and we are continuing our series of episodes on candidates for the U.S. Senate. Today we're talking to Erica Smith in North Carolina. Hi, Erica.
Hey, how are you, Kelly? I'm glad to be on with you tonight.
Yeah, super excited to talk to you. So could we start? Just give us a little bit of background about you and why you're running for U.S. Senate.
Okay, well, I'm a three-term North Carolina senator. I represent northeastern North Carolina. I formerly had 8 counties when I first started serving in the North Carolina Senate, but it's a large geographical area. In the 2018 new legislative districts, which, as you know, have been gerrymandered, and the court proceedings in the North Carolina Supreme Court start on that on Monday, July 15th, so we're excited about that, certainly. But I was the only Democrat double bunked with a Republican in the 2018 legislative districts, and I won despite all of the partisan and racial gerrymandering, so we're very excited. We hope to be able to get a good ruling, though, next week for the rest of the state. So in my third term as a North Carolina senator, I started out being very inspired by Thom Tillis, who was the Speaker of the House in 2013 in North Carolina when I was on the Board of Education in Northampton County. And I was so inspired by him because of his assault on public education. I knew I had a 5-point lesson plan that I wanted to take from the classroom floor as an educator to the Capitol floor of our state to teach Thom Tillis and others how we can fund education and provide job creation and opportunities for North Carolinians. Prior to serving in the local level and the state level, I was an engineer for the Boeing Company for about 10 years in Seattle, Washington, and then I relocated to the East Coast. North Carolina is home, and after a mission trip to Uganda in 2000, I decided to move from corporate America to working in public education and really giving back in an area that I was from in North Carolina. So this brings me today. Once again, Thom Tillis has inspired me with his failed leadership in Washington, D.C., along with this administration. So certainly now I need to take that lesson plan from the Capitol floor of North Carolina to our nation's capital, because we certainly want to return integrity, humanity, and common sense legislation to Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about North Carolina. This seems to be one of the true swing states, goes back and forth a little bit. We'll have some Democrats, some Republicans at statewide level elections and in the presidential elections. What's your sense on the ground right now about North Carolina? What sorts of energy are you feeling from the voters?
Well, definitely we're feeling momentum from the 2018 Blue Moon midterm elections. And as you know, we had, on a national level, historically, we had an unprecedented number of women elected to the United States House of Representatives. So we're so excited about seeing that same momentum come to the United States Senate. So North Carolina is a purple state. The only reason we have a congressional delegation of 10 Republicans and 3 Democrats is because of the partisan gerrymandering, which, as you know, the U.S. Supreme Court kicked back down to the state courts, or they said it's not a judiciable question because it's a political question. So we are now at a juncture in North Carolina. In the primary of 2018, even in the general election, Democrats put out more votes. They have more voters. we are a purple state, we should certainly, our representation should reflect that. Not only did we have a pickup of women in the U.S. House, but in our state House, we also picked up more women, and particularly more women of color. The Democratic primary on this side, incidentally, was almost 62% women voters, which was amazing. So we expect that to continue. As you know, North Carolina, as well as Commonwealth of Virginia, but now they've adjourned, but we're positioned to be the 38th state for ratifying the ERA. So we have that momentum going along with the 2018 election going. So we're really excited about what the landscape is going to be. It's very promising, and that's one of the reasons why I'm leveraged in best position to take on Thom Tillis. I'm already ahead of him in the polls by 7 points and now 9 points.
That is excellent. We're very excited about that.
Yes.
So what are some of the issues that are driving your campaign and that you're hearing from people as you talk to them?
Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about my upbringing. I came from a family of six. There were six children, and my dad is retired military, and we grew up on a farm in northeastern North Carolina. So coming from the rural roots, I'm hearing from the underserved and I guess the unheard community and constituents. These were the same ones in 2016 that felt left out. And pretty much this is the reason why we had the outcomes in the presidential election that we saw with the election of President Trump. Rural America has felt that they are left behind. So I have a strong record of advancing policies in the legislature that provide collaborative efforts between our urban centers as well as our rural areas so that we can have the type of infrastructure enhancements and economic expansion in these underserved areas. Along with that is job creation. This is very much about the economy. This is very much about workers wanting to see their salaries grow. So my tagline is, I'm out here working for us. Wherever you see me, I'm the only candidate who has consistently worked in the last 25 years in grassroots, local leadership, working my way up through every level of our party on the local level, and now working my way up through local service, local elected official, now state level official, and working my way to federal level official. And with that breadth of experience, along with being an engineer, an educator, and also an ordained woman of the cloth, I have a broad landscape of working with people in the community and really dealing day in and day out, rolling up my sleeves and meeting their needs, working on their behalf. And these are the people who hire us and send us to Washington, D.C., and they want to know when we get there that we're going to be there working on their behalf.
So I know that North Carolina is one of the states that's really been feeling the effects of climate change, global warming, pretty severely with some hurricanes. Can you talk about the impact that climate change has had on North Carolina and the kinds of things you'd like to do to help mitigate that?
Absolutely. So we have our sea level rising. We definitely want to continue with President Obama, former President Obama's administration's mandates as it relates to aspirational goals on getting our emissions set for 2030 and 2025, zero emissions. And so we want to promote a more clean energy mix, as well as moving more to solar. North Carolina is number 2 in solar energy. And so we're excited about that, as well as wind energy. We have a large Amazon wind farm off the coast of northeastern North Carolina. So looking at a more clean energy mix, promoting the electric vehicle opportunities that we have, and to cut down on our carbon footprint. We also are doing a lot more with mitigation because we're supposed to have these 500-year floods, intermittently, certainly not every other year, which has been the occurrence in North Carolina. So doing more planning down the lines of, our number one industry is agriculture, but we've got to start dealing with some of the hog farms and the lagoons that are in the floodplain. So we're doing a lot on a statewide level, and I've been very participatory in that because my district was the district that was hardest hit by Hurricane Matthew in 2016, and we had more flooding with Hurricane Florence, but not as much as southeastern North Carolina. So when we look at our cleaner energy mix, promoting wind and solar energy, but also looking at mitigating and doing the rural and urban planning in such a way that you are accounting for stormwater enhancements that need to be accounted for. We're also working with the Army Corps of Engineers because we do have some man-made flooding, but we're going to have to definitely change those protocols, and that is definitely a federal issue that I'm already working on behalf of the constituents of North Carolina.
You mentioned that you are an ordained minister. Could you talk a little bit about, we're seeing an increasing number of Democrats starting to talk about their faith and the relationship between their faith and their political ideals, and that's something that for a long time has been sort of in the sphere of the Republicans. So I'm wondering if you could sort of tease that out a little bit and talk about sort of the relationship between your faith and your politics.
Definitely. And so as a scientist, I'm a problem solver of those things that certainly have plagued mankind. And what I want to jump out with first are two things. For far too long, we have allowed the conservative right to own the conversation on the religious and moral high ground. We never before have I seen the level and the number of evangelicals support a leader of our country who thinks it's okay to pea grab or insult women or talk about assaulting women and not being challenged on that. And so when I look at where we have come, we've allowed them to own the narrative, and then we've allowed them to pretty much do a role reversal or the antithesis of what we believe is a moral high ground when it comes to challenging President Trump and even Senator Tillis on their lack of morals when it comes to caging children at the border. When it comes to having children living in squalor, I don't care where the children come from. These are God's children. And any decent Christian believing person who follows the teachings of Jesus cannot sit quietly and not challenge what's going on with the detainees and immigrants at the border. You're going to see more Democrats coming forward and talking about the issue of being pro-choice and pro-life. And so I wrote an op-ed about it, and it's on my website. It's called An Ontology of Choice. And I start with the premise of being a woman of the cloth is that women in the Judeo-Christian heritage perspective, they were treated as second-class citizens. When you look at the laws in Deuteronomy and in the Old Covenant, if a woman is raped and she's engaged, that compensation goes to her fiance. If she's not engaged, it goes to her father. Never does the woman receive compensation for a violent act committed against her. So at the very premise, because of I had a world-class theological education from Howard University, and I did postgraduate studies at Duke Divinity in North Carolina, and I'm excited about the liberal theology and the aspect that was presented to me to give me a better fundamental understanding of what it means to be created in the image of God and be able to be created male and female, be created equal. But back to my ontology of choice. I start off by changing the whole taxonomy, Kelly. I don't believe that the label should be pro-life or pro-choice. because I dare argue that those who are pro-life are really just pro-birth. They just want the baby to be born despite the circumstances, and they do not care what conditions that child has to live in. They don't even care that the child was conceived by rape or incest. Their only interest is being pro-birth. And pro-birthers, they don't care anything about 12-year-old boys being aborted on a playground with a toy gun within 12 seconds of an encounter with a police officer. Pro-birthers don't care about the groups of unarmed men of color who are gunned down in the streets sometimes, many times, by police officers. And so the taxonomy, and this is the classification of how I classify myself. I classify myself as one who supports pro-life choices. So there are pro-life choices, and there are the pro-birth, who are the formerly pro-life. And I believe that a woman has a right to choose what happens to her and when. We have a right to make a decision about family planning. We certainly should not be compelled to give birth to a baby that was conceived during rape. I don't think that that is fair to the woman. It certainly does not affirm her humanity. And so when we start dissecting these conversations and really looking at it from a human rights aspect, that's why I firmly support funding to Planned Parenthood, which 1 in 5 women at some point in their lifetime do access reproductive health care through many of our Planned Parenthood programs. I believe women and men should have access to contraception, to be able to family plan, have access to birth control. And I also believe that Roe v. Wade should be codified, as a constitutional right for a woman to be able to pursue her life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, her unalienable rights, which can only come when she has the right to make a decision about her body and when she decides to plan her family.
I wanted to ask too about representation. There have only been, a few women of color in the U.S. Senate. And we talk a lot about how, especially Black women are sort of the soul of the Democratic Party, the workers of the Democratic Party. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of electing more women, but especially electing more women of color?
Yes. Okay. So as we look, women, we could only serve in the last 100 years.
Yes.
Because we had to be able to vote. And so we're excited about celebrating 2020 and this centennial celebration for women. When we look at it, there have only been 2 women of color to serve in the United States Senate, Carol Moseley Braun and now Kamala Harris. And so that's a sad reality when you look at it. But even looking at the number of women total who have ever served as United States senators, we have 25 serving now. We've had a total of 58 in the last 100 years, and that's not even, really one every other year. So I've always been an advocate for women. Being in a non-traditional field as a mechanical engineer, I had to maneuver the dynamics of being in a male-dominated profession and being able to assert my performance and demanding equal pay for equal work. I've been fighting that since the beginning of my career as a mechanical engineer. So when you look at the now women making up more than 52% of the workforce, and understanding that when women come to the table and when we are policymakers, we open up an avenue of policy making that many times does not even come into the imagination or the creativity of men. And so I'm excited about what this means for women, but also women of color. So when we look at the backbone, African American women are the most loyal voting bloc in the Democratic Party. Look at what the Black woman voting bloc did in Alabama with Senator Jones. Look at what the Black woman bloc did for Georgia, Stacey Abrams, Florida, Andrew Gillum. And so it's time now for us to recognize that Women are no longer going to be satisfied taking the back seat, carrying all of the water. We're tired of having to bring our chairs to the table when we don't get a seat at the table. There's something to be said about understanding the diversity, and that with diversity we are stronger. And I'm happy that Representative Nancy Pelosi did share that. Our diversity makes us stronger in how we operate in unity, and recognizing that we definitely have to support women of color coming to the table, understanding, bringing that diversity to the conversation, not only provides more avenues for your faithful base, but it also levels the playing field. It energizes millennials, because it's not just about voting and the electorate. Fortune 500 companies are looking for this promotion of diversity. They decide where their headquarters are going to be based on how much diversity you have, as well as the supporting educational institutions, as well as the workforce. And so I would dare say that we have to stop talking the talk and really put our priorities where they should be. And that's about more inclusion, and understanding when we have that more inclusion and have the diversity and the representation of Black women at the table, we go the further and making sure we become the big tent party that we say we are. And in North Carolina, our state motto is to be rather than to seem. And so now we're going to become what we say we are.
Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we talk about?
Yeah, just a little bit about the issues and the diversity that's important in bringing a candidate such as someone like me. And I look at the wealth of experience that I have as an educator, as a public school educator, and I laugh all the time, Kelly, because I tell everybody I went on this mission trip to Uganda, and when I finished my theology degree at Howard. And at the time, I was patent and trademark officer at the United States Patent and Trademark Office in Northern Virginia. And on that mission trip, I looked at the way we could send technology to Jupiter and back, but we can't to third world countries beyond our border, or even rural areas within our borders. And so that was the challenge that led me to turn in my resignation, finish prosecuting the applications that I was working on, and to really devote myself to service over self. When I accepted the job as a public school teacher in Northampton County, North Carolina in 2003, my salary went from $75,000 a year to $25,000 a year. Kelly, how can anyone support a family on $25,000 a year?
Yeah.
And I said, no wonder you cannot keep secondary math and science teachers. And so at the high school where I started teaching in Northampton County, I started in January of 2003. I was the fifth teacher that those students had had. They had long-term subs because they could never fill that position. But in that experience, it taught me that workers across the state need opportunity. And, I firmly ascribe to what Nelson Mandela said, that a quality education is the greatest tool of the 21st century. Even though I am primarily a STEM educator, I really understand the importance of having apprenticeship programs, and also looking at, in the 21st century, looking at a workforce connected K through 12 education, because there are so many professions out there, so many jobs out there that are unfilled because we don't have the skilled workforce for it. And so when I look at what's going to propel us into 2020, people are suffering all over this nation. We continue to give tax breaks to the wealthy 1%. And we continue to pass those costs off down to the working middle class. The middle class is being demolished, and the lower middle class is losing so much ground. So when I look at the biggest issue taking us into 2020, we have got to close the wealth gap. And that wealth gap needs to be closed across demographics. As you know, Black women only earn 65 cents on the dollar of a white male. We would have to work an additional 8 months out of the year to celebrate being able to have that earning capacity, which is unfair. We have the tools in place, and it's time that equal means equal. So we must have equal pay for equal work for women, but also we need to close these racial wealth gaps. And that's going to happen when we start meeting the needs of those people out there who are making America work. These are the workers. These are the ones who built the country. And I firmly support labor unions based on my experience in corporate America. I was a member of a union. And when we get down to those basics, I believe that we can not only get people working in America again and working in North Carolina again specifically, but we get our government working again and not continue down the road of being run as a plutocracy by billionaires who have lost touch with what America needs. It will cut down on the gridlock. It will make sure that, I work every day. I need my paycheck. So I'm not going to support a 30-day government shutdown like Tom Tillis, which is ridiculous. I work every day on a farm, and I know what it is for our migrant workers to be afraid to even go to the hospital for health care. Because I work every day and I pay taxes so that I can pay for my Congress people to have good health care, I'm going to support a version of the Affordable Care Act that provides for prescription controls and life-saving health care for working Americans and even those who cannot work, but everybody deserves to have health care. So I know that my distinction as a candidate for United States Senate out of North Carolina, I know that when North Carolinians send me, they are sending someone who's going to work for them and then get our nation moving in the right direction and make government work for the people again and not the other way around, which it has become.
All right. Excellent. I love that. And we will, on our website, put up link to your website so people can find there are volunteer and donate buttons. So people should check those out and they can help out with your campaign.
Well, thank you so much. And I love listening to your podcast. I've listened to several of them. I was excited about Amy Klobuchar. And so I want to thank you for what you do. Two Broads Talking Politics. You guys are making it happen for all of us. And so when women enter the field and the conversation, the dynamics change for the better. So thank you.
Thank you for running.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.